Tēnā koutou katoa, no mai haere mai ki tēnei koho o te ipurangi nei, TOI Tangata. Welcome, hello everybody to our second webinar, our second TOI AKO webinar with TOI Tangata here today. We're very lucky to have Nita Brown from the Stroke Foundation who's going to be talking about their approaches and messages to understanding this and also approaches specifically to Māori. So yeah, that's all from me. Nau mai haere mai kia koutou katoa. Over to you.
Tēnā koe hariata, tēnā koe ngā mihi nui ki a koe mo tēnei huarahi kia tai au te whakaputa ngā kōrero e pāne ki tēnei momo kaupapa, whakahirahira, tēnei kaupapa hei taonga mō tātou e pirangi ana ki te ako, ki ngā tohu, ki ngā momo āhuatanga o tēnei mate ko te ikura roro. Nō reira, tēnei te mihi atu ki a koe hariata. Kia koutou katoa, kua tatu mai nei ki te ipurangi mo te ata nei, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou. He uri tēnei o Ngāti Rangi Nui, Ngāti Rangi, peka atu ki te riu o Waikato, ki Ngāti Kora ki Kahukura. Nō reira, tēnei te mihi atu. Ko Nita Brown tōku ingoa, ko au tētahi o ngā kaimahi ki raro i te tuanui o te Stroke Foundation. Kia ora koutou katoa. My name is Nita Brown and I'm a descendant of from Ngāti Rangi Nui, ki roto Tauranga Moana, from Tauranga Moana and from Ngāti Koroki in Waikato. So thank you very much, hariata, and thank you all for joining in with me to learn more about this kaupapa and what it is, what we can do to support and look after our whānau to prevent a stroke, but also for whānau who may be experiencing and going through that journey of recovery. It's not an easy journey, but hopefully with the additional support other than our whānau members, that we can make the journey a lot more easier in terms of hope. There is hope at the end of the once the person is transferred from the hospital into their homes. So what I'm going to share with you today is a little bit of an insight into what the Stroke Foundation does, what our key messages are, and how we can support our whānau who have experienced a stroke and are now back in their homes, and how we can also support our whānau as well, who become the carers, the nurturers, and the mediators or the liaison people between our whānau member who has experienced a stroke, as well as communicating or corresponding with the health team that they're currently dealing with. Nō reira, tēnei te mihi atu kia tātou katoa. So here is a rundown of some of the areas that I'm going to share with you today. Firstly, an introduction to he Tapu te Ūpoko, the reasons why I have utilised or integrated this kaupapa into the context of stroke prevention. And I'll give you a brief rundown on what a stroke is, and stroke and tangata whenua in this country. So what is the current situation in regards to stroke and how it has impacted our whānau that are currently living here in Aotearoa. Puta noa I te motu. And what are some of the risk factors and the common risk factors and long-term effects that stroke has on that person and their immediate whānau. I'll also talk about what we hope to achieve, what we actually want to do, because we are a little old organisation who does need the support of our experienced and our specialist health teams around the motu, and it's very important for us to actually make those links and connections and build those relationships and partnerships so that we can ultimately reduce stroke risk, reduce the stroke incidence in this country, as well as improve outcomes for all that are involved, including the medical sector, the health sector, which include all our health providers, all the different health providers that assist within our communities, as well as the hospital, and how we can effectively improve and make change and improve those outcomes for whānau, so that we're all coming together a little bit more, so that we're actually supporting the person who is affected by stroke. And at the end of the presentation, if there are any questions or you'd like to share some of your stories or your experiences, feel free to do so. But yes, I'll carry on now. Okay. Here we go. He tapu te Ūpoko. Now there was a koraiwa no roto Waikato, no Waikato, and he used to say to his some of the people that were coming through to the marae, and this is one of the quotes that he used to let people know. You see, it is not in the hands, it is in the head. We take it seriously, knowing that the head survives. For everyone that are watching, it would be good to actually think about that quote and think about, okay, I've heard this, he tapu te Ūpoko, I've heard it before. Our nannies and our koros used to say that on the marae and wherever we used to go. So, e ai ki a rātou mā, he tapu te Ūpoko. And they would tell us, you know, some of the reasons why, but what is it? What is the kiko of this kōrero? What is it that is actually tapu about the Ūpoko? Hea ha tapu ai te Ūpoko o te tangata? Why is it such a sacred or a treasured part of our tinana? And if it's considered such a sacred part of our tinana, then how can we actually nurture that so that we can look after our whole selves, our wairua, as well as our physical, so that we are able to contribute to our whānau, to our hapu, to our iwi, to our communities and the wider community as well. So why? Hea ha tapu ai te Ūpoko o te tangata. Why is it such an important part of our tinana? And if so, how can we actually nurture that so that we can nurture the rest of our tinana? Now, just a reminder, we've got major organs in our body that help the rest of the body function, but there are two particular organs in our tinana that actually make it work. Now, the Ūpoko is a major organ. Now, why is it so? I'm going to explain a little bit about that shortly. But before I carry on, I just wanted to share a couple of quotes from people who have experienced stroke, and they have managed to build the courage to actually share this experience with us. And this is one of them from a kaumātua, again from Waikato, who said, up until I had the stroke, I was a highly respected kaumātua on my marae, and especially on the paipai. I was known as a beautiful orator in both Te Reo Māori and English. My mana and standing in my community meant so much to my whānau, but now I can't string a sentence together. So how shameful is that? I don't go home anymore. It's got to be quite traumatising, and it is. It has to be traumatising for that kaumātua who is now not able to stand on his marae to whakōrero. And that hits the wairua, obviously, and everything else can go down, deteriorate. His wairua, his health and well-being will decrease because of the inability to contribute to what he loves to do within his hapu and his iwi. So for that kaumātua, there is a long journey ahead of him, and I'm hoping that one day he will recover to a place where he can actually communicate awaho and kōrero, and have those conversations, maybe not to where he used to be prior to his experience, but hopefully correspond and communicate to those loved ones around him. It's not an easy journey for someone who is experiencing stroke, and there are different levels of experiences that people have, because not one stroke is the same. They are all different, and people experience a stroke in different ways, and they also recover in different ways as well. So it's important for us to learn more about how we can support that person more effectively if we are having to look after our whānau in the home. Here is another quote, and this is by a young wahine from the Cook Islands, and she experienced her stroke at the age of 16. Yes, a stroke can happen at any age. It has no age, no barrier. So at any age, people are experiencing strokes. And for this young wahine, she experienced hers when she was 16. She's now in her mid-30s. She still has difficulty, because what happened to her was the outcome for her, she ended up with a speech disorder, and which is called aphasia. Now, aphasia is a condition when a person is unable to articulate their thoughts because the brain is not wired correctly. So what happens when they communicate with words, they may come out the wrong way, or they may not be able to articulate their ideas properly. So what they're saying is all jumbled up or mumbled. So for us as the listener, that can be frustrating, because we're not able to understand what they're actually trying to communicate. So this is an experience from a young wahine at that time. At the moment, she is, I am frustrated because my family don't understand what I am going through. My partner doesn't either, because they don't know anything about stroke. They think I'm just playing it up and tell me to get over it. I can't hear in this ear, and sometimes it's hard for me to think or get words out, or my words are back to front. I have aphasia. It was worse when I had my stroke, because I couldn't speak for what seemed like a very long time, and I was in a coma for 3 days. But as soon as I woke up, the therapist helped me to speak again. And it took me up to a year to be able to say a couple of sentences. And I felt like I was learning to speak like a baby. So this is the journey from that moment that person had her stroke. From the time she woke up, she was supported by the rehabilitation team within the hospital, and that therapy began to help her to speak. Now, although it took her up to a full year, the processes or the journey that it took for her to get there was quite tremendous, and it is a very long recovery for someone who has just experienced a brain injury as a result of a stroke. This is the last quote. I go to my doctors regularly, and I always get my blood pressure checked, but I was never told that having blood pressure could cause me to have a stroke. Next minute, wham, and I'm laying in the hospital, and they're wondering, what is wrong with me? I'm overweight, and I have been for years, but I just thought that was the reason why I had high blood pressure. But put it this way, but I had always been told, so I just accepted it. I accepted what the doctors were saying to me. No one told me that I could have a stroke, which I eventually did, and I was gutted. So experiences for each person are different. Not every stroke is the same, and that's quite important to know, especially for people who are not familiar and they are obviously beginning to learn. He tapu te Ūpoko, stroke prevention. Tapu is a fundamental principle of life. Now, this is a kōrero that was shared to me from Koro Huirangi Waikiripuru, Kaumātua from Taranaki. He shared to me that tapu, yes, is a fundamental principle of life, guided by boundaries of respect and safety, and is protected by tikanga Māori and Māori law. He tapu te Ūpoko is an important concept in the context of stroke, because tapu has a direct connection to the health and well-being of the brain and the head, and the whenua or te tangata. When someone experiences a stroke, not only is their world completely flipped upside down, their whenua is also affected in some way, and they become depressed at some stage because they don't know what is going on with their life now. It is a scary moment. So for the purpose of this kaupapa, he tapu te Ūpoko, and for the purpose of this presentation, the head is tapu because it is the home of the brain, the major control centre of the body. Like I mentioned earlier before, that the brain is a major organ because it has a major function in the tinana, and that is the control centre, the place, the mechanism that controls the rest of our body and what we do. The brain controls the way I speak, the brain controls the way I think, I feel, how I communicate with people, how I move my hands and how I move my head. That is the function of the brain, and it's a major, major organ that keeps the body alive as well as our heart. Here is a diagram, a simple diagram of two different types of strokes. We have an ischemic stroke, which is a blood clot. And if you can see the diagram there, it clearly shows that there is a clot forming inside the blood vessel. And that can be contributed to something that is travelling through our blood vessels. It can travel through our blood vessels from any part of our body, and it travels upwards towards our brain. And what happens is that it gets stuck in some of the blood vessels up there that may be narrowed by a wall such as that. And what happens with the narrowing of the walls is quite important, because the blood flow becomes less, it is reduced. And what happens when the blood is reduced, there's less blood supply to the rest of the brain. So that's what happens when the blood clot can form in that part of the brain, and it blocks, it can completely block it off. And that is called an ischemic stroke. The other type of stroke is a hemorrhagic stroke, and this is a bleed into the brain. It is, if I can kind of say the analogy of a balloon or a tyre that is pumped with air, and suddenly it bursts, and that is what happens when there is a hemorrhagic stroke in the brain. It is a bleed into the brain. So those are your two main types of strokes that many people experience in this country. There is a larger percentage of people, particularly Māori people, that experience ischemic stroke, and a small percentage of people that experience a hemorrhagic stroke. Here are some stats and figures, and these stats have changed in the past couple of years. We do get our statistics from Ministry of Health, which happens every 5 to 6 years. But these are the recent stats that we have for you today. So just briefly, stroke is largely preventable. However, there are an estimate around 8,000 to 9,000 people who will experience stroke a year. That is every year. There's currently 60 plus stroke survivors who live throughout in our communities today, who are either recovering from stroke or who are living and have lived with stroke for a very, very long time. Unfortunately, stroke can kill up to 2,500, maybe 3,000 people a year, and those statistics are actually growing due to the increase of stroke incidents in this country, particularly among our whānau Māori, as well as Pacifica whānau and our Asian communities in this country. So, despite the fact that stroke may be the disease, stroke is declining in some populations, it is actually increasing in our Māori, Pacific and our Asian whānau around the country. Stroke is the #1 cause of disability in this country. And each day there are 2 to 3 Māori that will be admitted into hospital as a result of having a stroke. And on average, there is people will experience a stroke at the age of 60, in comparison to 10 years younger, which from non-Māori people who experience it a lot less than that. These are some contributing risk factors, the most common risk factors to stroke. Hypertension, or the other word is high blood pressure. Hypertension is quite major in this country. A lot of people are not aware that, that they have high blood pressure. And it's really important for people to go to their doctors or to their nurses to have those regular checkups, whether it's a full cardiovascular risk assessment or a simple blood pressure, to find out what your numbers are. Now, if your numbers are high and you are medicated, for a person who is taking medication for high blood pressure, it is really, really important to continue on that management program for yourself. So that type of medication is there for a reason, and it's to keep your blood pressure at a level where it is healthy and where it can be maintained a lot easier, because high blood pressure is a high contributing factor to a stroke. So I'm going to tell you a little bit more about what we actually do to help support that, an intervention, a campaign that we support for people in the community to access free blood pressure checks. The next contributing factor is obesity. Now, the Ministry of Health have just released a strategy to support obesity in this country, particularly within our schools throughout the country. So we're hoping that there is some change over time, and it's because it can't happen in one day. It's got to be something that is consistent and long length and sustainable for all of those, for everyone who is involved. Type 2 diabetes is a big one in this country as well. So again, this is all about looking after ourselves. It's about going back to what we want to achieve within our whānau in terms of hauora, in terms of health, and how can we reduce some of these areas or these factors so that we don't have these horrible outcomes of a stroke or a heart attack, and many other heart diseases that these can actually contribute to. Now, smoking obviously is another one. What smoking does is put pressure. Not only is it bad for the heart, but it actually puts pressure on the rest of the body, and it increases your blood pressure to the point of having high blood pressure, which again, just a reminder that it contributes to having a stroke. Poor health literacy is another one, I think. many people in this country are not aware of how the health system works, let alone what you actually need to do when you go to the doctors. Many of our people choose not to enter a doctor or even go to a nurse because they, for many different reasons, but some of those reasons are around the cost factor, have had bad experiences before, just choose not to go because they believe that they're okay and that they will, or their body will work itself out. But it's very important to learn a little bit more about your own health so that you feel secure about what is going on with your body and hopefully for your whānau and for those people who are living around you. Very important. So again, these are some of our contributing risk factors, and it's important to take care of oneself so that we're not getting to a level of the state here. Because this is what is actually going to happen if a person experiences a stroke. This is what the long-term effects are. For someone who has had a very severe stroke, they become completely dependent on society, become completely dependent on care, external care, whether that care is coming from whānau members or a health team in the community. That's what happens, unfortunately. So for a person who is very independent and unfortunately experiences a major stroke that has left them debilitated and disabled, their whole world has completely changed and they become dependent on other people's support and other people's aid to make sure that they can function on a daily basis. So this is the impact, the long-term effect that a stroke can have if severe enough and it's not attended to. Unfortunately, again, and I know that these may sound doom and gloom, but this is the reality of people who experience stroke and at the spectrum of severe of a severe incidence. Relationships begin to break down, whether it's a relationship between someone who is intimate, husband and wife, that type of relationship, to a relationship breakdown within the actual whānau itself, because it takes a toll on people. The reality of looking after someone 24/7 and this condition after someone who has had a severe stroke becomes a major burden on that whānau. Not just the person who has experienced it, but on the whānau itself. So it's very, very important to ensure that we have those people within that whānau unit who can become the strength or the rock to bring people together, to facilitate how are they going to best look after or take care of their whānau member. Disability, depending on the severity of the stroke, it can be very mild to the point where the person can actually recover quite fully and return back to work, which is brilliant. And this is what we hope for people when they're on their journey of recovery. We hope that they can return back to a normal part of life. We hope that that person can return back to work that provides them income for them and their whānau. So that's what we always hope for, and that's one of the services, the provisions that the Stroke Foundation actually provide. But I'll talk a little bit about that later on. The quality of life diminishes, obviously, because of that, because of stroke. Many people can become depressed from this experience. Like I mentioned earlier, their life is completely turned upside down and they have no idea of what is happening. The brain has been injured to the extent where what they used to do before can no longer be done until, or at some stage, they go through their recovery journey and they may be able to do some things that they did before, but they may have to change or retrain the brain to do things differently. But in that state, people can delve down into a very deep hole. So again, as a whānau who is looking after a person with stroke, it's really important to learn more about stroke and how we can actually take care and look after that person who is on that road to recovery. Very important. Poor communication. Now, I mentioned earlier about the young wahine at the age of 16. As a result of her stroke, she had aphasia, which is a speech disorder. Now, for her to be able to communicate wasn't possible at the time, but the rehab team worked very hard to support her in her road to that recovery. So she was able to at least put a sentence together. So she was able to say at least a few words that she can project from her mouth. So that was important. To this day, she's like in her mid-30s, and she is able to communicate to a level where people are able to understand her, despite the fact that some of her words still get muddled. I think her family members get the gist of what she's actually talking about. So it's very important, again, for us as a whānau who are supporting our family member going through that journey. It's important for us to actually know how to do that and what is going on. Reduced health status, again, long-term effects, and lack of community and health provider support. Unfortunately, although there is a lot of rehabilitation support groups in the community, it is very hard or very challenging for a person to access those support systems within their own communities. Also through health providers. So it's very important, again, for our whānau who are actually supporting that family member, is to be able to go out there and find out what is available. However, and I'll talk to you a little bit about what we actually provide. We have a service where you can tap in to that will support you through that journey. When a person recovers from a stroke within the hospital and they have received the appropriate treatment and rehabilitation is given within the hospital, once they are completed there, they are now then transferred into their home environment. Now, this is where the major challenges occur, because obviously many homes aren't built to support people living with disability, and this is where some of those challenges are for the whānau. So again, it's really, really important for family and for friends, for additional support people to come together and start planning, start making some arrangements so that they are able to support effectively in terms of what's going to happen when they return home and how are they going to be looked after. It's not an easy road, it's very challenging, but with that additional support, I think you can lessen those stress levels that many whānau members have, because the burden is huge. Now, kaitiakitanga, when I look at this word, I'm looking at kaitiaki as in the people that are going to be that support system for that person. Okay, as individuals, as whānau, as hapu, iwi, Māori communities, how can we protect, if we are to go back and look at the brain as the vehicle, as the control centre of our body, how can we actually protect our taha hinengaro, the mental, the emotional processes that happen with our brain? How can we protect te taha wairua, the spiritual essence that makes up who we are, not just in the physical sense, but also in the spiritual sense? And how can we look after our tinana physically so that it lessens the disability that can happen if a person experiences a stroke? and how can we strengthen the whānau and our extended whānau so that we are able to effectively or to provide support that is effective and that is appropriate to the person that is affected by stroke, and how overall can we actually look after ourselves as a whānau. Now, why is the Stroke Foundation here today? Now, just briefly, our overall mission for the foundation is to save people's lives. Just quickly, going back to the beginning, there are 60,000, actually there are probably a lot more than 60,000 people currently living in this country with stroke. That's a huge number of people. Now, it is something that we can actually reduce. We can reduce stroke incidence by focusing on prevention, by focusing on campaigns and interventions that focus on prevention. Okay, so some of the things that the foundation does is, or wants to do, is to save people's lives. We want to improve outcomes for people when they're in the hospital. We want to ensure that they're being looked after properly in terms of receiving the appropriate treatment, as well as receiving regular rehab once they've come out of their sleep. We want to enhance the quality of life that people have affected by stroke, and I'm going to talk about it briefly in terms of the service that we actually provide for that area. Ka hata mea nui o te ao. It is people, it is people, it is people. Here are some of the campaigns. One of the campaigns that focuses on prevention, and it's very, very simple, and it is a blood pressure check. Now, the Stroke Foundation of New Zealand hold an annual campaign, and it is the blood pressure check, and it is to raise the awareness around high blood pressure and its relationship to a stroke. Now, these are some people who are ambassadors for this campaign because they have also experienced it within their own whānau, and we are very fortunate to have them support this this campaign for people in New Zealand. So it is important, like I mentioned earlier, when people do go to their doctors or their nurses, to have those regular checkups. That is up to you in terms of what regular means. As long as you are receiving or going there to get checked regularly. Blood pressure checks identify your numbers, and you are able to learn your numbers if you ask your doctor, what is the normal blood pressure number? I want to be at that level. I no longer want to be at a level where it is high, so how can I manage that so I at a very healthy level, and I want to stay there. Okay, so the New Zealand blood pressure check is held every year in the month of October, and this is it is a national campaign, and this is where the Stroke Foundation of New Zealand request for the help from organisations that have their clinical specialists, their clinicians, to be able to provide blood pressure checks in the community. As part of my role is to engage with relevant providers, health providers, to be able to do that. We need their help. We always need their help because of that. Our organisation does not have doctors or nurses. We actually need to go into the wider community to seek that support. And this campaign has been run for almost, well, we will be in its 9th year this year. And we're hoping that more and more providers will come on board to support this amazing kaupapa. And it's a campaign that is free for people to participate in. And it's all about raising awareness and learning a little bit more information about your own blood pressure check. Here are some of the other things that we do. Now, briefly talked about the blood pressure check. One of the other campaigns we focus on is the F.A.S.T campaign. Now, sorry for the image, it's not that clear. However, if you can see the F.A.S.T, now these are, this was adopted from the UK. It was adopted from the UK because of its simplicity. F.A.S.T is very easy. Many people can remember that, and it's quite effective. So just briefly, F is for face. Now we can identify 3 of these symptoms in a person because they are symptoms we can actually see or we can hear. Now for face, we can see the face drooping to one side. It can either droop to your left or your right, depending on which part of the brain has been injured at the time. But what we can see is the face drooping. When someone sees the face drooping, it is an indication that something is actually happening within the brain. Nothing else, no other part of the tinana but the brain, only the brain. Remember, the brain is the control center that controls the rest of our body, how it works and how it moves. So when the face has drooped to one side and the person is unable to speak, that is an indication that something major has happened in the brain. The next one, A for arm. We ask people to raise both arms if they can, but if they are unable to, they have no control of lifting the arm. That arm will be weak and it will fall straight to the side. They have no control of it. That is another indication that something else, something major, is happening within the brain. The third one, S. We can hear someone speaking. We can hear someone talking. So when this person is experiencing a stroke and their words become mumbled and slurred, that is another obvious indication that something major is happening within the brain. It's important that these people are taken to the hospital very, very quickly. Hence the reason F.A.S.T. T is for time. Time is vital. Time is very important to get those people into the hospital, straight to the hospital. Never mind about going to your doctor. You go directly to the hospital. Go to the hospital and you will should be admitted. That person should be admitted fairly quickly. Now once they get to the hospital, they will be assessed by a stroke specialist, a stroke physician or a lead stroke nurse who is on duties at the time. They will determine the pathway or the appropriate treatment for that person, but they have to go through a series of processes to identify what's actually needed for that, to identify the appropriate treatment. Hence the reason time is really, really vital. The quicker that person is in there, the better the recovery. We're hoping the better the recovery, all dependent on the severeness of the stroke. So we've got the F.A.S.T campaign, the blood pressure check, now the SALT awareness. Now we've got many, many organisations who focus on sugar. At the other end of the spectrum, we've got salt. Now salt, surprisingly, is a major contributing factor to stroke too. Why? What does it do? Salt actually raises the blood pressure in people. So dependent on the amount of salt that people are eating per day, it's important to know that salt actually contributes to the rising of blood pressure. How can we lessen that? Quite simple. We can reduce the intake of salt by various ways, or sodium by various ways. And there are many, I suppose, activities out there to learn about salt. But there's also different activities that people can participate in that happen within your communities. I think it's just a matter of finding out who actually delivers packages, learning activities to learn more about reading labels on food in terms of how much sugar is in there, but also how much sodium content or how much salt is in your food. Now we try to advocate that we we try to advocate that people, it's good for people to eat more raw foods like raw veggies, raw fruits, less manufactured or produced kai, try to make our food from scratch, just to reduce the intake of salt in our diets. It's a tricky one because a lot of people enjoy eating salt or adding salt to the kai. Unfortunately, for many people, more salt is actually not good for the body at all, simply because it raises the blood pressure in our system, which leads to high blood pressure, again, which contributes to stroke. What are some of the other things we do? Okay, so I've just looked at some of the prevention campaigns that we focus on, and those campaigns are all about raising the awareness about what is a stroke and how can we prevent it by doing some simple things. So we've looked at the F.A.S.T campaign. Now, just bearing in mind, there are many things that can contribute or we can't see that is happening in the body. However, there are 3 common things that we can see or we can hear: the face drooping, the weakness of the arm, the speech can be mumbled or slurred, that person can't articulate their words correctly. So those are great or good indicators that something is actually happening within the brain. T for time, vital for that person to get to the hospital as soon as possible. How do we, so we've gone from the prevention into what can we do, or what do we do to support stroke survivors? The Stroke Foundation of New Zealand have a service called the Community Stroke Advisors Service. Now, this service is a one-to-one referral service. We have a group of people that work directly with stroke survivors in their whānau in the community. These people are all spread out throughout the country, and they work within rural communities as well as urban communities, dependent on where the people are living. So our community stroke advisors are people with great knowledge in terms of who are the support groups or who are the rehabilitation community support groups within those communities. Our community stroke advisors will go into the hospital or the home, dependent on who's actually registered for the service, and they will work with that person directly. They will have them seated. They will work on goals that this person would like to hopefully achieve in time frames that is appropriate or suitable to that person. These community stroke advisors can also work with the wider whānau as well. It's not just the stroke, the person affected by stroke, but we also encourage working within the wider whānau as well, so that everyone comes on board and goes on that journey with that person. It's very important that everyone, or many people as possible, actually know what that person's plan is for their future. So these are just some of the things that the community stroke advisors, or CSAs as they are known in the community, what they can do in the community. They can also be advocates as well. There are a number of stroke survivors who do have many challenges, and they need that additional support on accessing rehab groups within their community, or just accessing general services. So it's important for our community service advisors to know the communities very well, to know who their support organisations are in the community, and they will try and do their best to advocate in between that. They will liaise, they will mediate as much as possible. It's all about the client as well as their whānau. So we are there to deliver that directly to people affected by stroke. If people want to, how do people access the community stroke advisors? Community stroke advisors currently go into the hospital. They go into the stroke units and they liaise with the stroke physicians or the stroke team. And they liaise with the stroke team and they identify who are the people that can be referred to by the hospital to our service. And it is from then on that our community stroke advisor will then try to correspond or communicate directly with the stroke survivor or their whānau. We're hoping that the whānau is actually around at the time as well. So those conversations can be had. We ask if they would like our support. And that's where the conversations begin. An agreement, if a person does decide to receive our support, that person will register. So people always register with the help of their whānau or with the help of the CSA. They will go through that process and they will be put onto our client database. And from then on, the work begins. The communication will continue between the CSA as well as the stroke advisor, the person affected by stroke, as well as their whānau. So there is a lot of that happening within the communities. Our community stroke advisors are our most valuable people because they are working directly with stroke survivors and their families in the community. So we depend on them greatly because of what they do, and we're always, if we need to improve our services in any way, our community stroke advisors will take on board that, and we will then receive recommendations to improve our services. That is it constantly happens. We always try to be responsive to the needs of our clients and the whānau in the community. And it is free. The service is free, which is absolutely great. So we need people to take advantage of that and share the information around so that people are informed about the service. It's very important because once that person is transferred from the hospital into their home, there is a major gap there, right there in between. And the Stroke Foundation want to fill that gap so that we can hopefully support that person on their road to recovery. We want to do the best that we can for that person. So these are just some of the things that the Stroke Foundation do focus on. There is a lot of work that needs to be done, especially in terms of engaging with providers and communities, but also engaging with the wider community, with our whānau and our people who are in their communities, working with their communities, know their communities very, very well, and we try to work alongside them to ensure that the resources that we have are provided to the people and they can disseminate or share that information to the wider community. So overall, our goal is to save people's lives in the way that we know best for now with the budgets that we have. So and also to improve outcomes within the hospital as well as in the community to ensure that people are receiving the best treatment and care within the hospital environment, as well as receiving the best quality care when they return to their homes and into their communities. We want to help that road to recovery so that we can support their well-being, health and well-being for future, for them as well as their whānau. So those are some of the things, and if you would like to learn more or want to gain more information about the Stroke Foundation of New Zealand, you can link into www.stroke.org.nz and go to that website, learn more about what stroke is, about stroke prevention, and our community service advisor, community stroke advisor service. And if you want to gain or get some resources from us, we can do that as well. We have free resources available, and I'll just show you very quickly. These are some of our bilingual Māori and English resources. This one here clearly shares the message about FAST. Here we got the F.A.S.T. Now it is both English and Māori, and there's reasons why they're not just in Māori, is because it's important to get the messages out there. Not enough of our people actually know what a stroke is in Māori, let alone what it is in English. So it's very important to share these key messages for our people to actually know about it first. We've also got the little FAST magnets, very handy in our kitchens, and it's actually important for every whānau member in the household to know what this is, especially our tamariki. Our tamariki are the first ones to come across our whānau members who are in need, so it's important for them to actually learn that. F.A.S.T. Got brochures here, a little bit more information about what is a stroke and how to lower blood pressure, or how to maintain a healthy, normal blood pressure. So a little bit more information about that. We also have large posters, as you can see behind me, not very clearly, but there's one hanging behind me. That's A3 size, and I've got A1 sizes. Really, really great resources for kohanga reo, for kura kaupapa, for the marae, which is really important. It would be great to see these FAST posters hanging in wharenui or wharekai at each marae throughout the motu. That will be wonderful. At least our people will be receiving information, very simple information, about those three common symptoms: onset of stroke and time. And knowing that time is very critical, is very vital in that situation. So with that, I did see that I've got questions here, whatnot, but if you do have any questions, you can email me. My details are lowercase. Actually, I'll add that to the link if Hariata is going to share that too. But if you want to know more, go to our website, visit our website, and you can also find us on Facebook, Stroke Foundation of New Zealand. Our communications manager does keep that updated on a regular basis and shares a lot of stories experienced by people themselves, which is important for people to share, because they are our greatest teachers to help other people learn about about stroke in New Zealand. So I think I've come to the end of my presentation, my kaupapa. So without, with that, I think I'll say kia ora for this opportunity to share some important kōrero around this kaupapa. Tēnā koutou katoa.
Tēnā koe. Thank you very much. Wow, what a fulsome webinar and a wealth of information. I definitely got a more in-depth understanding of stroke. I was familiar with FAST and the campaign there, and had seen some of the stuff around the champions, I suppose, talking about stroke, but being able to get that clearer understanding of the contributing factors and actually the things that go around and what our whānau experience, because that's not a first-hand experience for me, has been very valuable. Thank you very much. Tēnā koe, e te manukoro o tēnei kaupapa, ka tika ka whakapua ki tēnei kaupapa kia mātou nei, mātou te hunga I hara te mea e tino matu te mōhiotanga ki tēnei kaupapa. He mea reto, he mea taumaha I etahi wā, he mea uaua hoki. No reira, ngā mihi kia koe, kia koutou katoa. Thank you very much. Noho ora mai.
Kia ora, noho ora mai.